Hi everyone! It is officially 2026. As with every new year, that feels wrong to say, but it's true. The new year is here. I hope yours is off to a lovely start. And of course, with the new year will come new fashion, new inspiration, and new trends. So today, I am here for my fourth time sharing my fashion trend predictions for the upcoming year. When it comes to predicting fashion trends, I really try not to just list trends I think will show up this year, but also talk about why I think they'll be trending. By looking at the fashion industry, the socio-political context of a given moment, the general cultural climate that fashion will exist within. All these things inform fashion trends, so I'm excited to talk about not just the trends themselves, but also all my reasoning and context along the way. I also haven't watched any other trend prediction YouTube videos or anything while I've been working on this one, because I thought it would just be more interesting this way. So I'm super intrigued to see if anything I'm saying here lines up with what other creators are predicting, or if it's totally different. With that, let's get into our first overarching trend category. My first big prediction is a focus on texture, movement, and craft. Fashion that embraces a real-world physicality that cannot be fully witnessed or experienced through a photo or a screen or a digital rendering. I think I have actually predicted aspects of this before in relation to other trends in previous years, and many aspects of, craft and texture have already been building and growing recently, but I think 2026 is the year it will become one of the strongest, most defining trends in fashion. 2025 was the year of AI truly blowing up. It was the year AI seeped into all of our lives, whether we like it or not. And as a result of that presence of AI and all of its drawbacks, it was also the year we saw a pretty anti-AI sentiment solidify quite strongly in the culture. One of the top issues on people's minds lately is disillusionment and fatigue, with everything being virtual and synthetic and artificially produced and fed to us by a computer. So I think because of that, fashion this year will see a much greater value placed on things that connect us with the physical reality of clothing. And I also think these touches of texture and movement and craft will manifest in more subtle, realistic ways. Because I think people will be drawn to not only real-world dimensionality in their clothing, but they'll also be drawn to clothing that feels practical and wearable for real-world daily life as well. Especially because AI often creates such fantastical, physics-defying, unrealistically smooth and perfect images, the practicality and realism of these clothes will be part of their appeal. One of the biggest specific trends I think we'll see from this category in 2026 is layered lace trim. I'm thinking lace-trimmed camis and tops. Little fluttery lace layers poking out underneath all kinds of tops, sweaters, even skirts and dresses, or even little lace wraps or sort of apron-like overskirt pieces that are tied around the waist to create a similar effect of a little layered trim poking out. It creates a sense of layering and texture. It has a physicality to it. It's also realistically wearable for the day-to-day. And this also has a bit of a late 2000s, early 2010s vibe, which is another trend we'll talk about more later. Overall, I feel like this look is just so perfectly suited to this moment in fashion, and I think it's going to be everywhere in 2026. On that theme of layered waist tie items, I also think tying a little triangle bandana around your waist will be even bigger this spring and summer than it was last year. Again, it creates real-world dimension through layering while also being easy and wearable. I also think long dangling rope waist ties will get bigger this year, either as separate layering items like this, or as a design feature built into a top or dress like this. Lots of things tied around the waist here. These first three trends were all waist tie items. There's a lot of untapped potential for accessorizing in that area of the body, I guess. I also expect to see more tassels this year. Tassels and rope belts are both textural, dangly items with movement that are still understated and easy to wear. And they also both have an almost ancient feel to them. Like, you can picture people thousands of years ago wearing versions of this. I wonder if that's also part of the appeal in this moment where people are just like very disillusioned with modernity. Will the next big trend be aesthetic monk core? You never know. Next, this year, I think we will see more unique layered necklace stacks with like customized little charms, dangling chains, unique clasps. Again, it's subtle and wearable, but it also has dimension, texture, layering, movement. It kind of feels like a slightly more grown-up evolution of the charm necklace trend of the past couple of years. I still love the charm necklace, by the way. I've got one on right now. But even this one kind of feels like a more elevated charm necklace to me. And I do think fashion is finally starting to shift away from the sort of cutesy, kiddish, girly floralification of it all. So this makes sense to me as a new necklace iteration and evolution. We've also seen a lot of solo necklaces with one big chunky pendant recently. I think that will definitely continue in 2026 as well, but maybe this will feel like a subtler, more dimensional alternative. I also predicted longer necklaces coming back into style more for 2025, which definitely did already start in 2025. I think that will continue for 2026. And I think unique necklace stacks give people another way to play with longer necklaces and layer different necklace lengths together. Another layered look I think we'll see in 2026 is even more layered basics. This already trended upwards in 2025, but I think it will continue to grow and evolve in 2026. Again, layering itself creates more texture and dimensionality, but this is also realistic and easy to wear. For another lacy item with texture and movement, this is kind of specific and would definitely be a little more niche, but I think Juliet veils will become trendier this year. They're already sort of a niche bridal trend. I think they'll get bigger in that sphere, but I could also see a similar style of headwear maybe working its way into non-bridal fashion too. Still not necessarily for every day, like going to work, but I could totally see this on red carpets, in more editorial shoots, that sort of thing. I'm also realizing a ton of these trend predictions are accessories. And I think in general in 2026, we're going to see a bigger focus on accessorizing. We've already seen a big trend towards personalizing and customizing everything in fashion lately, but again, with a more down-to-earth wearable feel that focuses on subtle depth, texture, movement, etc. I also think more subdued wearable accessories and a trend towards accessories in general rather than clothing items does feel like a bit of an economic indicator, not to call everything a recession indicator, but these are not the trends of super spendy times, I would say. These feel like the trends of a tighter budget, which is aligned with how people seem to be doing right now economically. Of course, trends do rely on status hierarchy, right? They can't be too accessible because then they're not cool anymore. But I also think the focus on the physicality of these items still allows the wealthy to signal their wealth and status through the quality of craftsmanship on these more textural crafted items. In this AI and fast fashion age where you can look up and shop for products online that don't even physically exist, having access to artfully handcrafted pieces of superior artisanal quality made by a skilled craftsperson is one of the ultimate status symbols. I mentioned some of the trends in the last category felt a little more down to earth, which ties in quite smoothly with our next trend category, which is a trend towards earthiness. This is another one that has definitely already been happening somewhat. I've seen an uptick in earth tones, clogs, and other sort of whimsically outdoorsy feeling clothing. But I think this whole vibe is just going to continue to evolve in new ways that feel fresh and just continue to get even bigger this year. I think this trend towards earthiness reflects a rejection of tech for similar reasons as the previous trend category. But in this case, instead of channeling that rejection of tech into an appreciation for the physicality of the clothing items. With this trend, people will be channeling that rejection of tech into an appreciation for the physicality of the earth, of land, of our natural world, and how we can meaningfully physically connect with it. Especially because the tech itself is actively destructive of the earth. For specific fashion trends, I already mentioned clogs and earth tones. I think those will get bigger in 2026. For clogs, I'm particularly imagining garden clogs, the earthiest of all clog options, of course. For colors, I think brown as the default neutral rather than black will continue to rise in popularity. And I also think chartreuse has kind of been on the rise and might continue to get more popular this year, which is a very earthy shade. Although I do have other predictions for more dominant colors of the year, which I'll get to later. On the topic of garden clogs, I do also think just gardening vibes in general will be big, specifically for spring. Obviously, gardening as an activity interfaces with the literal earth, like dirt and plants, but it also interfaces with the earth in a broader sense in regards to sustainability. And it also communicates like having a hobby, enjoying the outdoors, doing something community-minded that can serve yourself and others around you. It also sort of requires some level of disconnect from the internet if you're busy outdoors working with your hands. Gardening as an activity signals a lot of values that I think people are moving towards right now. So I also think, consciously or unconsciously, people drawn to these values will also be very drawn to clothes you might wear to garden, like the clogs. I'm also picturing maybe a utility work apron with pockets. Maybe also some sort of gardening type straw hat. Maybe a little neckerchief or a hair bandana. A little whimsical, a little bit of a romanticized, stylized version of gardening attire. But still, again, down to earth and grounded. As another pathway for this trend, I could also see fashion that's inspired by the garden itself, where instead of the wearer dressing like the gardener, the wearer dresses like the flowers, the plants, the garden. One earthy motif I saw repeatedly in 2025 was a very large floral graphic where instead of like a floral pattern, it's just one big flower, often with a stem on like a skirt or a dress, almost like you are the flower when you're wearing it. I think this style will get bigger in 2026. I could also maybe see other more organic floral prints starting to come back. We've been really big on more geometric patterns in recent years, like plaid, gingham, checker, stripes, argyle. So I think maybe a more organic, fluid floral print will finally feel fresh again in 2026, especially in like unconventional or unexpected color combinations for a floral print. Another earthy inspired trend that I think we'll see more of in 2026 is cat's eye stones in jewelry. I feel like I've just started to see inklings of this on Pinterest, and I think it totally fits this mood. It feels fresh and fun and a little creative. It's almost a little mystical, yet it's also a bit refined and elevated, yet also a bit earthy and nature inspired. I also think a swirl motif, like a spiral graphic, will definitely get bigger this year. This is something I've already seen in 2025. I feel like a lot of the cool girlies already have swirl jewelry specifically, and I think this is poised to blow up in the mainstream in 2026. The swirl, of course, feels a bit earthy because it's this round, organic shape, and spirals exist in many contexts in nature, like snails, shells, whirlpools. And a swirl is also like cool and distinct, yet also very neutral and versatile. It could work for lots of different styles, like an earthy garden vibe, or a whimsical witchy vibe, or a really edgy alternative vibe, or a super simple, clean, minimalist vibe. The swirl is kind of that girl. All right, our next overarching trend category is what I'm going to call the working woman. I think this will be a trend towards looks that say, I'm employed and I have shit to do. Style that suggests the need for practicality specifically for the workplace. The biggest theme coming to mind for this trend is women's office wear and tailoring. Specifically, I think vintage looking 70s and 80s inspired women's workwear will be big this year. I've seen it on a ton of runways, and that era was also when a lot of women were entering the workforce in droves in higher numbers than previous decades. So often when we picture like the busy, high achieving working woman, that's sort of the era that comes to mind. I'm also imagining bags getting bigger and shifting to more of a work bag style. In a recent video, I mentioned noticing a trend among influencers and on the runway of people holding their bags under their arm instead of using the strap or the handle, sort of creating this stylized depiction of being like a busy working woman on the go with a big heavy bag full of important stuff. And I think that totally ties into this idea. I definitely see large work bags styled for fashion in 2026. Is this trend category also a recession indicator? Maybe not a recession, but like an economic downturn indicator, I feel. I mean, I'm picturing a style that basically glamorizes high-level employment, heading to your office job, doing work, getting paid, being valued by your workplace even, perhaps. And that can only be an aspirational fantasy when it's something a lot of people don't have. It also suggests not just being employed, but doing a type of work that is associated with credentials and skills and like thinking and decision making, as opposed to jobs that are seen as unskilled labor, which, to be clear, there is no such thing as unskilled labor. And those quote unquote entry level jobs also require using your brain and decision making and developing certain skills. But those jobs aren't valued as much and don't pay off as much financially. So I feel like glamorizing this type of job also speaks to our economic situation. And I also think fashion that draws from jobs associated with a certain level of knowledge and brain power and decision making and expertise indicates that this trend might also be a reaction to AI, which is also part of why people aren't getting those good jobs. You know, the economic anxiety and the AI anxiety are intimately connected. And overall, I think this style just feels like it's part of a general pushback that's saying, actually, human thoughts and skills are important and valuable, and also we need money to live. Please give us jobs and pay us for our labor. On the theme of fashion that signals knowledge and intellectual value, I also think glasses for fashion will get bigger this year. There have definitely already been a few different trendy styles of glasses in the past year or two, but yeah, I think glasses as a fashion accessory will increase in 2026. I also mentioned little neckerchiefs earlier with the gardening aesthetic, like this, but I also think this could definitely fit into this vintage workwear intellectual signaling style as well. It can definitely be styled more preppy, polished, academic. Another style I think we'll see more this year is color blocking, which also feels a little aligned with this serious working woman vibe to me. I guess because it just uses solid colors instead of patterns, which feel more typical for office attire. It's also giving recession indicator a little bit. Again, color blocking is low-key for when we can't afford patterns, but it's fine. We could also maybe see another trend emerging here of people embracing more blue-collar workwear that's still associated with specialized skills and trades. Honestly, the more specific the skill or trade associated with a certain piece is, the cooler and more aspirational that piece could be, I think. Like, I could truly imagine things like a specific vintage welding apron, or like a specific vintage mechanic suit or carpenter tool belt or something, becoming these hot aspirational niche items that would like shoot up in resale value on eBay or Depop or something. Again, we're signaling skill, we're signaling knowledge, we're signaling physical craft, we're signaling person who provides value through their own individual skills and brain power. All right, our next trend category is late 2000s / early 2010s normcore. I'm really just picturing like basic girl fashion from that time. This is largely inspired by my delve into the fall 2009 aesthetic trend that manifested last year on TikTok. Overall, it just feels like the perfect amount of time has passed for this style to come back into trend. And it also taps into that drive people have to connect with the reality outside of our current tech and idealize a time before all of it. And because of all that, I think this late 2000s, early 2010s aesthetic will become even more popular and mainstream in 2026. I mean, obviously, it's already present. I made that whole video about the TikTok trend. But when I think of the dominant fashion trends of 2025, I don't think of this look, whereas I think in 2026, it might really come in and start to replace some of those other dominant trends of the previous few years. Specific items I think we'll see in this aesthetic. Again, lace trim, especially lace trim camis and tank tops for layering. Also, lower cut tops and Henley tops to layer those lacy trim camis with. A classic late 2000s look. I'm also thinking boot cut jeans and flare jeans. Flip-flops have already started to come back. They align with this look so perfectly. I think flip-flops will definitely get bigger in 2026. I also have two main color predictions for this year that I think both have sort of a late 2000s, early 2010s vibe. The first one is dark purple. This is a color I feel like no one was really wearing or using in fashion for like the past 10 years or so, I want to say. It hadn't really been in that time until suddenly in 2025, I started to see a lot of different people warming up to purple again, including myself. I also feel like a dark purple can work quite well with a lot of other colors I wear and a lot of other colors that have been trendy recently. It works with red, butter yellow, pastel blue, chartreuse, brown. So I think it's the perfect time for dark purple to come back. And it feels very mid to late 2000s to me. I personally had a dark purple iPod in 2009. My other color prediction is teal. I have a very similar reasoning for this one. I think it's been out for long enough now that most people haven't really seen much of it over the past handful of years or more, making it poised to feel fresh and different again now. Case in point, Hailey Bieber wore this fall. And this is totally something that would have looked dated just a few years ago. But now enough time has passed that instead of dated, it's like vintage inspired. It's a reference, you know? The recency cringe window is closing. This is another color that was quite popular in the late 2000s and early 2010s. It also feels super 80s, which could tie in with that sort of 80s workwear vibe we discussed earlier. The dark purple feels a bit more 70s, but that can also play into that retro 70s workwear. And also dark purple, if you just rebrand it as like eggplant or cabbage color, then it ties in with that earthy gardening vibe too. A lot of these trends can interact and play off each other in interesting ways, I think. Finally, I could also see some of those late 2000s, early 2010s hairstyles coming back, like the braided or twisted bangs, waterfall braids, maybe a braided half up, half down, or just generally like the low half up with bobby pins, this kind of vibe. Maybe even a poof with the bangs if we're feeling crazy. Honestly, I just think these are genuinely cute and pretty and stylish. And they kind of fell out of popularity, but they have never looked ugly or bad to me. And I feel like as other fashion from this era comes back, I think if the teen and college girlies of today rediscovered these hairstyles, they would be super into them. As you may have noticed, many of our trend categories so far kind of felt like different reflections on reality. Ultimately, all my trend predictions in this video kind of come back to the presence and influence of AI and its impact on our culture and just how people are feeling about it right now. I just think it's this new, incredibly dominant force that wasn't really impacting our lives before, and now it's impacting everything. So I think it's going to impact fashion really dramatically and directly, and it's already starting to. And the last trend category I have here is one that I think will face and grapple with this splintering of reality we see online a little more head-on with literal themes of unreality. I'm thinking surrealist, absurdist, and Dadaist themes coming into fashion. I'm thinking fashion subjects as dolls, robots, aliens, puppets, all things that can seem real or human but aren't. I also think illusions, like strange shapes that make bodies look distorted, or masks and other things that hide the face and thus the human identity of the wearer. This also brings to mind Expedition 33, a video game that came out in 2005 to huge success and critical acclaim. It was incredibly popular and it won like every award. And okay, what I'm about to say about this game will be very broad and vague, but if you are concerned about any inkling of a spoiler, you can skip to this time right here. But this game grapples with so many themes of reality versus unreality, human and artificial, the real world versus the screen or something artificially created, even if it feels real. What is the nature of what makes something real and human? This clearly is a theme a lot of people are grappling with right now, and it really, really resonated with audiences in 2025. So this is all to say, I definitely think we'll see more explorations of these themes in media and art and fashion in the coming year. If anyone's curious, I did not play this game myself because I don't really game like that, but I did watch my boyfriend play it because I wanted to watch for the story, and it was awesome. I enjoyed it so much. Anyway, a lot of this fashion I think will be more editorial, runway, or red carpet, not so much in the mainstream. Again, I think in daily dressing, a lot of people are just more trying to like connect with reality and get through life. Whereas in spaces where fashion functions more as art, there's more room to use it to interrogate these philosophical ideas like reality and unreality. That said, I do think we may also see more wearable iterations on these themes in the mainstream. And I think a more wearable take on this not quite reality theme is sort of a theater vibe, like a circus or carnival feel, clown vibes. That also plays into the more absurdist, Dadaist energy of silliness. And also maybe styles that reference costumes, like a pirate or a soldier. I'm picturing different types of styles that reference artifice through performance. In another recent video, I noted that 2025 saw a trend towards like 17th century menswear. I described them as sort of Revolutionary War vibes, with things like puffy pants, those little military jackets, billowy shirts, slouchy tall boots. But a lot of what I identified as Revolutionary War vibes in that video could definitely also be described as theatrical, costumey, or circusy. Those little jackets, totally giving ringleader. Those puffy pants, totally giving clown. The whole look overall, totally giving pirate, which is like a classic costume look, you know? There's also been an uptick in Harlequin and Argyle patterns recently, which I think could grow in 2026. And those definitely both feel sort of clownish or even court jester-ish. Speaking of which, I could also totally see a more medieval jester interpretation of those theatrical carnival looks as a continuation of the medieval revival we've been seeing. Will we see jester hats? Probably not, but I wouldn't rule it out. I also think, like I said, a clown or jester feel is especially relevant here because it's not just performance and artifice, but it's also very silly and sometimes bizarre. Again, it feels very aligned with those themes of Dadaism and absurdism, which have historically been embraced when the horrors of the world and like the meaninglessness of suffering are just too much to bear, which is something many of us are grappling with again now. I also think a lot of this sort of theatrical, surreal aesthetic will have a bit of a dark undertone to it because it does feel directly related to kind of grappling with some of the darkness that surrounds us at this moment. For a subtler, more down-to-earth exploration of the surreal and absurd, I could also totally see the rise of like a Twin Peaks aesthetic, or even just a Twin Peaks revival happening in 2026. Firstly, a lot of the fashion in that show is just very aligned with current fashion trends. Secondly, I think this show just perfectly blends that more subdued, realistic normcore feel. A lot of it also references that women's 80s workwear look we talked about earlier. It blends all that with a totally surreal, strange, theatrical sensibility that's like equal parts creepy and alluring. It is the perfect show to meet these times, aesthetically. I know the reboot revival thing happened in 2017, but I feel like its time is now, especially because David Lynch passed in 2025, which could have prompted many creatives to sort of look back and reflect on his work, and then take inspiration from it and have him and his legacy in mind with their projects moving forward in 2026 and beyond. All right, with that Twin Peaks appreciation rant, we have covered all my trend predictions for 2026. As always, I'm sure this will not be the be-all end-all of fashion in 2026. I'm sure a lot of other fashion from 2025 will carry over, and I'm sure new things will also pop up that haven't even occurred to me. But I do think that these predictions will capture a lot of the overarching vibes and motifs of 2026. So I'm already excited to check back in a year and see if I was right. Thanks so much for watching and taking the time to hear my thoughts on this. As someone who is not at all a professional trend forecaster, does not work in the fashion industry, but is really just doing this for fun as an avid observer. And of course, I would love to hear your thoughts on these trend predictions in the comments and any trend predictions of your own. Plus, if you do leave a comment, maybe watch another video like this one right here and subscribe. I heard you will finally figure out how to execute the perfect waterfall braid.